Hey up everybody, welcome to the I'll Do Cycling YouTube channel, where today I'm going to be taking a look at who you should be putting on to your World Champ Road Race team. World Champs, of course, is a part of this Superclasico competition, so you have to sign into that one if you're confused to where it is. But of course, let's have a look at the riders. The most expensive ones, as has been throughout the whole season, it's Wout, Mathieu van der Poel and Julian Alaphilippe. For me, I pretty much just have a rule in Velogames now, where if Wout van Aert's available, you just put Wout van Aert on. I think that you have to put on either Van der Poel or Wout van Aert, whichever one you like better. You know, I just think that Wout van Aert's the favourite, and he's so incredible that you almost have to put him on. And actually, it almost makes it a bit easier to make a team, because if you didn't put Wout van Aert on, then you don't end up having any low point riders, and there's not really quite enough in the middle ground to create a good enough team. So I'd probably put on Wout van Aert or Van der Poel. For me, I'm going with Wout van Aert. Going down the riders, you've got, just a touch on Lulu there. Alaphilippe I'm just not very keen on. For me, Van Aert and Van der Poel are just the better options. Lulu just hasn't looked great this season. That's just my opinion. Remco at 28 I think is a bit too much, just because the scenario where he's going to have to win this is probably just solo, and I'm not overly sure how likely that is to happen. You know, and Pogačar also for 28. For me, I think they'll be working for Mohoric. So the 28 point riders I'm not very keen on. I think that you're going to have to be quite brave to invest 28 into these riders, considering how the likelihood of them actually succeeding in this race isn't massively high in comparison to some of the riders who are 20, 18, 16 credits in comparison to 28. I think it's too much of a risk to be putting on those riders. 26 point riders, I wouldn't be picking Roglic, to be honest with you. I think since the Vuelta he's kind of switched off from the whole cycling scene. I think he's literally just ready to almost, call the season and just kind of move on to the next season. I feel probably get on to Lombardia or something, but I'm not very keen on Roglic for this race. Kwiatkowski can sometimes pull out a good result, especially in World Champs. We saw that last year, but I'm not sure about the likelihood of that happening this year. I'd be more tempted to pick Sagan, just because of how he looked at the Tour of Slovakia. Plus, it's Peter Sagan. He knows how to do these long races. He's been a 3-time world champion, and I think that he definitely has the capabilities of, piloting it solo into the final, 50k's of this race, and just being very capable. Honestly, just don't pick Caleb Ewan. He's not going to win. That is going to be a waste of credits. And in fact, I'm not overly sure about any of the 24 pointers. Pedersen hasn't looked great. Yes, he kind of looked okay at the Benelux Tour, but he pulled out of that race. Matthews is probably your safest 24 pointer if you did want to pick one, just because his consistency in the World Champ races is pretty incredible over the last 4 or 5 years. His worst results 24th, and that was in Harrogate in 2019, which is just a biblical kind of day. Hershey looked good at the Tour of Luxembourg, but I don't think good enough to be contesting for this race. The climbs aren't steep enough and not long enough. I think that Matthews is probably your best 24 pointer. Schachmann hasn't had form in a while, so I probably won't pick Schachmann either. 22 pointers, I won't pick Demar. I don't think that's very good. Pidcock is questionable at best, to be honest with you. He didn't look that great of a Vuelta, and I'm not really sure why there's so much hype around him for this race, to be honest with you, considering that he's never really done well in a one-day race of this kind of length. Lampart and Stuyven you'd be picking if you're banking on the whole strategy of Belgium sending guys up the road, trying to, help Wout van Aert in that kind of way, but I think that's honestly quite more of a dangerous strategy. I see both of these being very much helpers for Wout van Aert. The only Belgian rider who I'd be tempted to put on, probably Evenepoel, because I think he's given a bit more of a free card in this race. Trenton's a good option, just because we've seen that he is very good and experienced in these kind of races. I think that Trenton is a very safe option, but for me, I think a lot of the good riders are in the 20 point bracket. The best ones for me are Asgreen, Kuznefroy, Mohoric, and Seneschal. I wouldn't really go looking past any others. I don't think Pollitt, Nizzolo, Moscon, Christophe, Gaviria, Ivan Garcia, Degenkov, Benoit, Ballerini, Aaron Baru, or Ackerman are particularly good options, especially when you consider the guys that are available. You know, Seneschal won the Primus Classic the other day. Mohoric, we know, is very good over this kind of distance, and he's been almost a favourite for World Champs for what feels like 2 months now. Asgreen provides you with an attacking option from Denmark, who are definitely planning on pulling a bit of a De Koenig strategy, is what Valgren has said. So they'll be attacking a lot of the time. And then Kuznefroy, he looked good at Britannia Classic, which was about 255k. He was really thrashing Alaphilippe and Honore around that day. So he can definitely do it over the distance, but then, you know, he didn't look great at European Champs, but that was a different kind of effort. The hill was a bit longer. So I think that overall your better options from these guys are probably Mohoric and Seneschal. Those are probably the safest ones in my opinion. And then just underneath them you've got Sonny Colbrelli, who is one of the favourites for this race. There's been a bit of umming and ahhing over him just because, you know, how is he very good at the efforts that are going to be required in this race? They're very short, very snappy. He seems to have been improving his kind of like long range kind of power, if you see what I mean, his climbing ability. So therefore, how well is he actually going to do in this race? He's not the fastest sprinter, so it's going to be quite difficult for him to win. He'd almost have to get himself into a reduced group of some kind of slower guys, because he's not going to beat the likes of a Van der Poel or a Wout van Aert in a sprint. He is definitely, without doubt, the best 18-pointer. I wouldn't really consider any more of the other ones apart from Kung, but to be honest with you, I'd pick Colbrelli over Kung every day of the week for this race. 16-pointers, the main one that I like is Michael Valgren, who, if you've seen, has won 2 races recently, one-day races in Italy. He's in incredible form, and he pretty much always does a good performance for World Champs. It's kind of crazy how consistent he can be in these kind of one-day races. I think that Valgren is an absolute fantastic option for teams, and especially since his price is a bit lower at 16, this is incredible value. I'd really be pricing him more at 20, 22 points at the moment, not the 16 that he has been given at the start of the year, which has just carried on through this race. Of course, 14 pointers, I think the best one is Christophe Laporte. You could, you know, put in an argument and say Maggie, but for me, I think that Maggie's better when it's towards the end of a Grand Tour and everybody else has declined in terms of fatigue, and Maggie's a little bit fresher than everybody else. I think there's probably a bit of an overhype around Maggie to win this race. I'm not overly sure about how likely that is to actually happen. For me, I think Laporte, after winning the Grand Prix de Wallonie the other day, is actually a better, safer bet in this sense. 12 pointers, the best ones for me. I think Mikkel Frolic Honore and João Almeida are the best ones, but considering that João doesn't really do one-day races all that often, I think that actually Honore is definitely a better bet of all the 12 pointers. There's a really good 10-pointer which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. It's Ethan Hayter. Of course, he did incredibly well at the Tour of Britain. He's really fast. He came 8th in the World's TT just the other day, which means that his form is still quite good. And I think that Hayter is an incredible option for quite a lot of teams. And for 10 points, he is one of the cheaper options for you to pick up. I think that you'll see a lot of teams with Hayter in just because of how cheap he is. 10 credits is pretty incredible. I'd be pricing him more towards 16 to 18 at the moment, considering just how good he is. But yeah, then you've got some of the 8-pointers. So, 8-pointers, there's not too many to be going at. I think your best one is Rasmus Tiller, just because of how they looked at the Antwerp Port Epic and the Grand Prix de Wallonie recently. Whether he'll be working with Christophe or not is a bit unknown, but I think that Tiller's probably your best one. 6-pointers and 4-pointers you will definitely be needing to pick if you are choosing the likes of Wout van Aert in your team. So, best 6-pointers that I can find for you are, there's Marcus Houlegaard, who came top 10 in the European Champs the other week, and he also did really well at the Tour of Norway before then, and I think that Houlegaard is a really classy bet to be putting on to your team. The other one, the main one, would be Quinn Simmons. I think that he's just got this incredible aerobic capacity where he could still be there And, you know, I'm not sure about him winning, but he could definitely pick up a top 20, a top 15 for you. Other options, maybe Gonzalo Serrano. If you watch the Tour of Britain, he was the Movistar guy who pretty consistently posted into the top 10. And then you've also got Connor Swift, who did well at the Britannia Classic about a month ago. And Fred Wright, who's also looking in a great run of form, considering that he finished 9th or 10th at the Eschborn Frankfurt, which happened literally like a couple of days ago. In terms of 4-pointers, my advice would be that not a lot of them are very great. If you can boost up to a 6-pointer, that's probably a better option. But if you have to pick a 4-pointer, my recommendation is to go with a smaller nation who's more likely to get into the break. I think probably one who will do that is Lucas Ericsson, just because Sweden, I think he's probably like the best guy that Sweden have. He finished 20th at the Grand Prix de Wallonia, which means that he has good enough form to get into the break, but he's not good enough to think that he'll like hang on for a good result out of like the peloton. So I think that Lucas Ericsson is probably quite a good one. Maybe Patrick Gamper would be another one. Other than that, you could bet on some like assist points, so like Harry Sweeney for Michael Matthews. You could also pick up like Domen Novak for Mohoric. But for me, I think your best bet is to go with the smaller nations and just try and think about somebody who might get into the break. There's not much science involved in that, but it's just the way it is. That's the best advice I can provide for you. That's it in terms of all the riders. In terms of a couple of teams that I might recommend to you, if you wanted to play it really safe, go with Wout van Aert and Van der Poel. I think that's probably the best shout you can go with. Counteract that, you'd have to pick some lower point riders, so I'd probably go with Simmons, and then you have to choose 6 points off again from Honore, so I'd go with Hurligard. So you could go with a team like that, and then of course pick a 20 pointer of your liking. We just got Mohoric in there for the example, so you could go with that if you wanted to be really safe. Of course, if you wanted to pick Remco, then you'd put 4 points probably onto Hurligard or Simmons and pick yourself up an Ethan Hayter. If you wanted to not go with Remco and you wanted to go with Sagan, then I'd probably put those 2 points maybe onto Mohoric to get a 22 pointer like Trentin, or you could put them onto Ethan Hayter and get yourself Mikko Frolic-Honore. If you didn't want to go with Sagan, you want to go with Michael Matthews, then I'd probably say your best shot is to go with Christophe Laporte instead. If you wanted to go even further and you just wanted to go with a 20 pointer like Asgreen, then you could have I'd probably say your best shout then is to go with Colbrelli and then use the points to get yourself Valgren and then Hayter. This is probably my favourite team at the moment. Wout, Asgreen, Colbrelli, Valgren, Hayter, and then just a guy to get him a break. I think that's a really sound shot because you've got 5 guys who are just all capable of finishing inside the top 10 in this race. But I won't babble on any further. Those are just a couple of team scenarios that, of course, I've come up with. Of course, feel free to make up your own and put them in the comments. I want to hear what you guys are all thinking in terms of who's going to win this race, who the good picks are. Let me know if I've missed anybody and who you're going to pick. I just want to hear all about who people are thinking of deciding. And yeah, best of luck for the World Champs Road Race. The next one will be Roubaix next weekend. All that's left to say is thanks for watching, stay safe, and I will speak to you in the next video. Salut!